Welcome back to the TEHNC podcast. We're here to talk about Andor, the new Star Wars show, which is a prequel to Rogue One, which was one of the best Star Wars movies. We both thought Rogue One really deepened the whole Star Wars world, and Andor is sort of taking that deepening that Rogue One did and really building on it. It's the 5 years before Rogue One, and it's the story of Cassian Andor, who's the kind of resistance figure played by Diego Luna in Rogue One, and this is sort of his whole story. So let's just dive right into this. Mark, what do you have to say about Andor? What really strikes you about it?
I love it. Probably the
Agreed.
biggest thing for me was what you talked about briefly there, was what they're doing here in Andor and what they started in Rogue One was they're deepening the Star Wars universe by, especially in Andor, they're going inside the Empire and inside the rebellion. So, and what I mean by inside is we're getting to see the people that are inside of these collective systems and how it works from the inside out. So we're getting deep characters. One of the things that's beautiful about this series is, for me, every single character on the screen feels real. There's a depth, even if they're only on for a few moments. There's this feeling like I'm watching something real, like this is real. It's like you could feel the emotions, you could feel them trying to struggle. There's a real embodied quality to the experience for me. And what's magnificent, as far as I'm concerned, is when you're creating a work that's part of a bigger story world, like Star Wars, you could either kind of add to it in a way that's giving you another perspective on this or that, or a storyline, an extra storyline here and there. But what they're doing is not just that. They are showing us a domain and level of reality that we've not seen before in the story world. And what that does is it changes our perspective of the whole story world. It deepens the entire story world. So now, after watching Andor, when I look at another Star Wars work, I'm carrying with me this more deep inner experience of the Empire and the rebellion. And that is an integral way of adding to the story world that is truly transformative of the entire story world. So this little work changes the whole story world for me. And
Yeah,
for a lot.
I think it's as you say, the way they're unpacking the Empire, showing it as this bureaucracy. So you're seeing the links between this and sort of the corporate state around us, the way everyone's kind of sniping each other, everyone's kind of leveraging for power in different ways and being obsequious to the higher ups in certain ways, or they're scared, so they operate out of fear and ego. And this whole system encourages that. And for me, actually, the final episode really brought something else up in the Empire, which is the repression, the sexual repression and repression of feelings and emotions. And so the lived experience, we have this amazing moment between the woman, the very upright, prim woman, and the guy who rescues her, who's also, and there you can see the way she's charged up. It's almost like there's this erotic spark between them that neither of them has, especially that she hasn't really like rocked with. She says, I suppose I should thank you, and she doesn't know what to do with it. All that excitement suddenly, finding herself face to face with him. That was an amazing scene. Yeah, but that really, to me, also unpacked this bigger thing in the entire Empire, how everyone is in that kind of very repressed, walled off kind of environment because there's so much danger from other people in the Empire, so they're all scared. So it's really doing that.
Yeah, you go ahead.
I was going to say, and by contrast, the way that the town is a character of itself. We've talked about this before, but the way in which they actually filmed live, they didn't do this all digitally. They actually built much of that town for the show, and you can feel it. You can feel the way everyone is kind of in a community. The way they ring the bell, they have a set of codes for when they're being attacked, and everybody's kind of working together. And in the final episode, you also kind of feel the way there are pockets of resistance that are operating independently, but all to the same purpose.
Yeah, and
which is very
I
interesting
want to
as
stick
well.
to that really quickly here. In this last episode, Cassian listens finally to the recording of the kid who died, who was writing the manifesto.
The manifesto, yep.
And that moment for me too was very profound, and it really hits this mark, and it's brilliant to me. It captures so much about what a rebellion is, but on a deeper level, where he's talking about basically every act of resistance, no matter how big or small, has an effect. And the idea here is that, and what he's talking about here is authoritarianism, or control is all about control, but freedom is natural. Control takes energy to hold. Freedom naturally arises from our being, but control, to try to control, takes a lot of effort and energy and oppression, and so, and that thing of the two of them, with that sexual energy that's been oppressed and repressed, is perfectly connected with that we can actually feel in an embodied way the repressive, obsessive kind of tight control that it takes from the individuals themselves. Like, it's like so many of the individuals in the empire, even the ones who are, especially the ones who are part of the rebellion, have to like really contain who they really are. It's like this whole effort. It's not just a collective effort, but all the individuals are like containing themselves as the system is containing them. And you feel that. That's, to me, I've rarely seen this level of unpacking a systemic phenomenon like this, the oppressive rebellion in a kind of stream here is that we've got the external repression becomes internal repression, and then this wellspring of freedom that can't be contained.
Mm-hmm. It's doing kind of an amazing job. This is something that Rogue One really opened up too, this idea of sacrifice and people being heroic, not just heroes in the kind of cinematic way, but just everyday people being heroic. And Rogue One, you really see it. You really see it in Rogue One that they know it's a one-way journey, but they go anyway because they have to, and they succeed actually, and then that was worth it. And then they just hug it out at the end when they die. But in this one, even the other guy, the kind of nerdy guy in the Empire with the mustache, who turns out to actually be an agent for the Stellan Skarsgård's character, that the way that guy is like, I'm done, I have a family now, and he's like, you have to stay in there, and so he's just still there now, being a hero, even though he doesn't look like a hero at all. He's like not a heroic kind of guy, but that's what people are in real resistance. And obviously the stories we all know are like World War II stories with the resistance and stuff, but this is true of any kind of conflict situation like that, where you have an empire, a colonial empire of some kind. You always have small bits of heroism and people willing to sacrifice. In this case, the kid who builds the bomb, because presumably his father was the one who got tortured to death in the hotel. You see that. All these different characters who are willing to sacrifice or willing to do something.
Again, great point. And really, they really nail it here. It's like so incredible. This underpinning of what it takes. Like, what is it that makes a hero? What is it that, that kind of transforms everyday people into heroes? And for me, the final moment of the whole series, of the whole first season, is when Andor gets in front of Axis, and he stands in front of him at the end, and he basically says, "Take me in or kill me."
Yep.
And what we understand is that he has seen too much. He knows too much, and he recognizes that if he's captured, he could hurt the rebellion. And so he is prepared to die, not in a battle, but to sacrifice himself, because he believes in it so much, something greater than himself. And what's funny to me is it's a perfect Andor moment. You know, the title, Andor, right? Andor. So you've got this, you know, and you take me in and I'll be part of it, or kill me. But it's this great kind of, and all the way through the series, it's built to that moment. It's about how this central character, Cassian, goes from a regular, normal person surviving every day to a hero. The entire first season is about that.
Yeah, we may as well talk about, for people who don't know, that this is in 4 sets of 3. It's like 4 triads making up the 12 episodes. So 1 through 3 is kind of the story about Andor. Cassian goes from just being a petty thief, basically, but a very good one, to suddenly kind of getting immersed in this world a little bit. And then the next 3 are the story of the heist, that big heist where they steal all the stuff, and he kind of deepens it, but he's still not ready to commit. He's like, I'm taking my money, I'm getting out of here, I'm not gonna kill anyone else. I killed this one guy, and here's your, so he's got his own code, here's your necklace back, give it back to the dude, I'm out of here, boom, and then whatever, 6 through 9 are basically him in the prison and really understanding the system, how this is actually a giant system that's not going to go away. And also we see it a little bit through the eyes of the other dude, his awakening too, of realizing, oh, we're not getting out of here, we have no choice but to fight. So then they fight, and then the fight actually is 9 through 12 is him really committing to the rebellion.
Yes.
And saying goodbye to his mother, which is a pardon.
Right, the final trilogy, the final 3 is the death of his mother, who was a fervent
believer. Yep, a
believer. Her death, and then the funeral is the final.
Yep, and when she says, if I could do it again, the only change I'd make is I would wake up sooner. Yeah. Basically, some version of that.
Beautiful. It was a brilliant moment too.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great moments in this thing.
We were asleep, and that unpacks what happens is we let them come in. We turned the other way because we had each other and we had our everyday things, right? We had our, and so we could keep going. So we slept.
Yep.
We didn't.
Right, and then there's just, in that final one is very operatic. It reminded me of, well, I guess the what I think of as this sort of key thing that would be The Godfather, that kind of whole operatic long scene where a lot of threads are coming together and people are killing one another and that. And then Game of Thrones did that quite brilliantly a number of times, especially during the scene when the set blows up. There's just all these different threads, all this tension with all these different characters suddenly coming together for resolution. But I was really struck, even by the way, when the Indian woman kills the handsome Irish Empire spy dude. And she's just like, that's just one more thing. As long as I'm here, this guy's going to die. Boom. So she leads him into the thing and kills him and goes off. That's just the kind of thing that each of these characters is playing their role, and all of them are kind of together trying to form this resistance in a way, but they don't have this central organization.
That's also the beautiful thing too, is I get the sense of watching this that the resistance is basically, we're seeing the birth of the resistance in this series. And we're seeing it, from the other Star Wars movies, it's always there in a way, the rebellion is this thing that's always there. We have not seen in any deep, profound way the birth of that rebellion.
Yep.
And that's what this story is. But we see it in a more, it's like, we see it in a very integral way, in that we're seeing the individual, we're going into the individual, the relationships, and we're going into the groups, and we're going into the mechanisms of the thing, and we're going into the social structure. I mean, it's like unpacking in all these different dimensions organically. So what you were talking about there is like it unfolds, and it's like you could see how everything is leading to each other. There's this web of interaction. Like, it's not like, in a standard mythic traditional story, the hero faces a big challenge and this, but in real life, it's more subtle. It's more these little tiny things that edge you towards this moment.
Mm-hmm. And small acts of resistance. Even the guy who took the phone call from Cassian Andor and then told the big guy about it,
Right, we're seeing this.
But then that guy ends up getting killed too somewhere. He ends up dead on the ground during that big riot,
But it's part of the organic, collective kind of emergent process.
Mm-hmm.
He's really capturing this kind of chaotic yet beautifully
synergistic
awakening.
Yep.
And of course, it is these tiny moments, these acts of resistance, these acts of oppression, and then the acts of resistance, and like the oppression leading to awakening, to the resistance, and we're seeing the change.
Yep.
And how it affects individuals and relationships.
Right. But also to the point you made about how it's working, in integral theory, there's the 4 quadrants, the interior and the exterior, both of the personal and the collective. So this show also has a very, very deep emotional resonance. It really goes into the characters' emotions. So it's a very moving and beautiful show in that way. There's constantly scenes that are just beautiful, and it's beautifully scored. Also, the score, should be said, whoever did that is like did a beautiful job of really getting into this like resonant kind of field of their emotional undercurrents and the way they have to deal with pain and loss and trauma, but also keep going and find strength inside of that. And then, of course, we really shouldn't leave the fact that this show has resonance to today. So it's not just a show about Star Wars, but there's also clearly communicating something about resistance and empire and that, and all the ways in which that has applications to America and the rest of the world.
It is so resonant for me with what's going on right now. It's beautiful. It's just, it's just...
Yep. Except that in this show, there's a clear enemy, and whereas in the real world, it's much more. People are like half the people are convinced that the other half are their enemy, and yet so no one's quite clear on what the empire is.
Yeah. Well, right now the empire is more, for us, the empire is more of this polarization field and these shadows that are coming up, and but we could talk about that somewhere else. But
there is sort of a system in place too that's benefiting from that whole polarization field. It's just that they don't have that same polarization field in Andor.
No. But a lot of it is translatable, directly translatable. Just the whole feelings of oppression, and also, and even the oppressors, how a lot of them don't even realize they're oppressing.
Well, they're trapped in a field too. You really feel that, how each in their own way.
And in a way, we could say that these eruptions of oppression, of authoritarianism, may come from collective repression of things. So when society starts to repress more and more, that control becomes obsessive. to a point where the society tries to control everything. And then that authoritarian kind of energy kind of just, wakes up, and just, and I love that moment at the funeral when the mother, so many of the things that she said were perfect in that thing, but the whole thing of that it lives in darkness. And when we sleep, it feeds it. So our act of ignoring it, our act of sleeping to the rise of this oppression actually helps it rise. We're not being neutral. And I think that's another one of the beautiful, this series has a lot of profound revelations about the process of social repression and rebellion.
Yep, how sublimation always leads to something erupting that's not healthy. Yeah, it's an amazing show.
It gave me hope too, in a way, which I think was really beautiful, because I keep thinking about that line of the manifesto guy,
Alex Lothar.
It's just this whole idea of that freedom is natural. It can't be, it ultimately can never be totally extinguished. The human beings will always wake up at some point and try to be free. It's like a drive that we cannot destroy.
Yep. Yeah, he's a very interesting character. Even when Andor first meets him, he's the only one who's actually friendly to Andor, and he always has, like, it's easy to underestimate him because he's not macho like all the others, and they're all like, well, this guy, he's obviously the brain, not the brawn,
Right.
And yet he constantly was saying very insightful things, even during this little time that they were together. So it's great that he kind of becomes the guy now who's written the manifesto. Like, you need the intellectuals and you need the brawn. You need them both.
Yes. And also, it's really hard to deliver deep existential philosophical revelations in a film without it becoming, kind of
preachy or didactic.
Right. And all of this, every one of these these philosophical points are made in the middle of a deep emotional process. It's part of a deep emotional experience that's happening.
Right. That's another thing that you just find in complex works in general, that when they drop a piece of exposition, it's usually in a context where it's not only giving the audience the fact, but it's also deepening something in a character that's happening, or it's happening during a beautiful poetic scene with music and kind of montages where you're kind of building a feeling and a visceral kind of steamrolling of events.
Yeah.
So it's not just dropping, exactly like you said, it's not just, let's just be didactic for a bit.
At specific pivot points or bifurcation points, like, so it's an acupuncture point in the arc of the story, just at the right moment, at the right peak of a storyline, getting it right at that moment. And they did it every time. They did it every time in this.
We tip our hat to Tony Gilroy, who created this series and wrote most of them. Not all of them, but he wrote most of them. And it's beautiful. I can't wait for season 2. It's 2 seasons total. So there's only one more season. They decided we're doing 24 episodes.
I want to
2 seasons of 12.
I just want to say one more thing here on this point.
Yep.
You used the word beautiful. And when we first started watching it, both of us, first thing we thought of is, this is beautiful, man. This is just beautiful.
There's something which you don't expect in a Star Wars film. There's something very beautiful about it. And especially at the endings would always do something that kind of contextualized the whole episode we had seen. And the ending did something beautiful that suddenly you felt that thread viscerally inside you coming out. And so it was just
this is a
beautiful.
Key. This is a really interesting key. It's like when we think of the word beauty. The idea of beauty, we often think of a sunset, something that is pretty. We tend to think of beauty as something pretty. But in reality, beauty is not just yes, it can be something pretty, but beauty is also an experience. Krishnamurti talks about what is beauty. And what struck me about his kind of thinking was that beauty is actually that moment between you, the experiencer, and whatever it is that is hitting you in that moment. And you become one with it. There's this, no words, no thoughts, there's this, whoa. And then the second we say, well, that was beautiful, it's gone. But it's that moment where you feel, in this series specifically, it's this moment where, as you said, like all the pieces come together in this perfect kind of inside of us. It's like we're watching it and all of a sudden, wow, like this, it's this experience. Wow, that was just, it's just like it brought you, he kept bringing us to these moments of awareness, of not just cognitive awareness, but emotional kind of completion that was connected to all these other things. That was this, and there's a beauty in that kind of just being in that experiential reality they created over and over and over again. It was the combination of the sound, music, the performances, the story.
Yep, and also, as you said, also just the number of characters that are being juggled. I heard Tony Gilroy in an interview on the WTF podcast with Mark Maron talking about how they had over 100 characters that they're juggling. So it was a very complex thing to hold. But you really, as you said, all of the characters have their own, you feel that they have their own life that continues on either side of the part that we're seeing. Like this, their life is going on, boom, like the big guy, whatever his name is, and all these different characters there and these different sub-characters in the Empire. You feel like each of them has a life. So you're just kind of pulling into the part that matters. But also you see how the events that are happening outside are resonating with them as well. So even these minor characters are caught up in the flow of resonances. You feel the interconnectedness of all these characters. It's
and when you feel those interconnectednesses and that flow, for me, there's a sense of beauty in that. Like just off the top of my head, that moment where in the prison, the head guy on the floor who has been kind of holding that, he's going to get out someday. And like the whole kind of build up in that 3-episode arc, when he realizes it, and all of these strings come together, and he realizes it.
How many guards on each level?
Never more than 12.
That moment for me was beautiful because that awakening gave me an emotional kind of, it's like I could feel his kind of, holy shit, I'm never getting out of here. And that what that does to his heart and his mind. And that lights up in me my own experiences, that, I've experienced like that or whatever, and how the stories, his story and Kazian and all the other prisoners' stories and the whole kind of story of the thing all comes together in these moments. There is a sense of beauty.
But even in that sacrifice, though, because when you realize that they get to the edge of the jump and he says, I can't swim. And it's not clear if he kind of knew where they were going, but if he knew that the only way out of here is to jump and swim to shore, he knew, I'm just going to lead these people to freedom, but I myself, I'm not going to do it, but I'm going to sacrifice myself.
Over and over again.
So I think if you rewatch the show, you'll see a lot of things like that that are layered in there, and you realize, oh, okay, cool. So it's an amazing show.
that's one of the things that I think is so profoundly true, and that is beautiful too, is that representation and realization that the fight for freedom is greater than oneself. And human beings, when we get into that state of being, it's a powerful, powerful state. You know, that moment when he wakes up and he takes charge and he says, get out, this is it. Becomes this incredible heroic. And that moment when we see that he can't cross over, you know, it's Moses, right? It's, you know, he can't go to the promised land, but without him, the others would never make it.
Yep. And Cassian is actually the leader who pushes him to do it when he's got the microphone. He's like, is that all you got? You got to tell them. Has to be you. So.
And that wellspring kind of just came out of him. And you could feel that it felt like it was not just coming from his individual beingness. It just came, it was like, we have not seen that in him before. It rose out of this, probably that wellspring of human freedom that, you know, those, you know, when we connect to that deeper place in us, we can do things that are beyond what we can normally do. So anyways, I'm in love with it.
We love the show. It's beautiful. We recommend you watch it again because you'll probably see a lot the second time that you missed the first time. And thanks for joining us. We'll probably do another one after season 2 is over, so whenever that comes out. And in the meantime, stay well, stay safe, stay awake. See you guys later.
Peace out.